Mr. Jones?
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Keller? Chairman Schaefer?
Here.
Motion to excuse Councilwoman Keller.
Okay, I will second that. Since there's only two of us, I'm going to assume it's approved, and Councilwoman Keller is excused. Item 2 is approval of the motion summary for the meeting held February 19th, 2018.
Motion to approve the motion summary.
Second. It is approved. Item number 3 is time for public comments for anything that's not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here to talk about something that's not on tonight's agenda, we'll entertain that now. The other items we'll get to in the order that they're on the agenda. Anybody have anything that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we will move on to item number 4, which is discussion and consideration for the installation of no parking signage on Richardson Street from Hayes to the alley between Richardson and Cheshire Street.
This came in as actually asked for no parking signs on Richardson Street. The police department did sent out surveys in the area. We received one response from that. She was for the idea of having no parking on one side of the street. The reason for this is the street's narrow. Ideally, about a lane and a half. Ideally, if we had no parking on both sides, we'll open up the road, but we realize that people park close to the residents, so we're asking that we have no parking signs on the west side of the road from Hayes Street to the curb there. About, I think there's 5 residents actually on the street, there's 6 that's on the corner that would affect.
Jessica, which way am I looking right now? Am I looking north?
Yes, you're looking
Okay.
north. So it kind of, the actual street will curve up around, so then it will, the no parking would go to the alley, correct?
That's correct.
So be on the west side and then the north side.
Is anybody here for this issue? Wants to make a comment? If we ask that you come forward one at a time, we'll need your name and your address for the record, please.
One, Umesh Razrani, 164 Richardson. It's the property that's one down, right there. You just missed it. Up, right there. You say it's in a survey by police department?
Yes.
To get some feedback?
Yes.
What made you do the survey to begin with?
We wanted input from the citizens that live there.
What started that?
Pardon me?
What started that?
I'm not sure what exactly started the survey or.
I mean, police department has a lot of things to do besides taking a survey on the street. That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom
Well, I
of.
think the thing is the street is narrow.
Mhm.
You have vehicles parked there, then you have an emergency problem with being able to get fire trucks and squads and that through. I'm not sure how the original complaint came in because I just became a part of this committee.
Okay.
So I can find that out for you and get back to you.
Yeah, because I want to know what started that, because I've not noticed of any issue that I am faced with by being there. Yes, street is narrow. I would prefer street, city to, spend the funds or whatever and put it in their agenda to widen that street to make it legal, street legal, rather than like an alleyway. It's maybe, like you say, 1.5 wide. Off the surveys you took, I think there's 5 properties, if I'm not mistaken, that do use that. Only one said there's a problem to put it, right? So one out of
We have no
5.
response from anybody else at the time. So I was just reporting on what we had as far as response.
So I wish I had seen that survey. I would have said no. So you would have 1 and 1. And there's another gentleman here, I believe. I don't know his street address, but I know he's my neighbor. Can talk his view of it, and he can also say which way he would have gone, yes or no. But in any case, if you look at that property and zoom in, where would I park? It becomes a problem. Right now, the west side of the park, where it is to park, right there, see where the red truck is, and come a little bit south, where the truck is, and we're able to park there and alleviate the problem because we don't want to park in front of somebody else's. You see, there's a driveway here for that person to park in their driveway in the garage in the back. For me, with my red car and the blue SUV, I have nowhere to park except there. I'd rather park parallel than at an angle the way it is, if I can park across, which I've done many times, and that has not caused any problem. I've never been cited. I've never had a problem with the.
Well, there was a problem with parking across, and that is it was a city throughway in the grass area. Somebody had cut several of the trees down there and actually extended that onto private property. So the city has a throughway or an easement right here. As you can see up through here, that red truck is actually parked in the city easement. You can see all the vehicles parked there. Well, they cut the trees down that were originally there to make that ad hoc parking lot, but then it also went back in on the private property. So
Okay, I'm not
we own a certain amount of easement there.
Sure.
Okay, I think it's, Jessica could better answer that, but I think it's probably,
It varies per street.
Yeah, so we've been using that west side to park.
but that's what I'm saying. They've removed the trees without permission from the city. Somebody's went in there and actually poured gravel on a private property that's not there. So that's not the parking area. So when we looked at it, we said the street's very narrow.
Correct.
When you have cars parked on either side, okay, legally, right, it's not enough room to get emergency vehicles through.
Okay.
So that's the reason we're suggesting that the west side, which would be to the left on this picture, be no parking so that you could park in front of your residence right there at the pavement. And
But
that
there's
would
not-
leave enough room.
There's not enough room for the house. And if you make that legal, then I would like myself to be able to park anywhere on that street east of it without having the neighbor call the police to say I'm parked in front of them.
Okay.
That's the problem I run into.
Okay,
I want to park and not bother my neighbors. Because if you go anywhere in Columbus or some major cities, even in here in Delaware, right? You can park anywhere on the street, but that's not looked at this way. This is, everybody thinks in front of their house is their own. They don't think it's yours, the city's, because they treat it as their own.
Mhm.
Like where my blue car and my red car is right now, the SUV, I treated that as my own property, even though I know it's a city. Because if you look at the city, whatever you called it, easement, it extends all the way into my gravel, into my dirt, into my house, literally. So I have nowhere to park except one car. And that's not possible anymore, with the family of 5 or 6 living to able to park only one car. So my recommendation, you look into investigating widening the street and making parking available on both sides of the street.
okay.
Anything else I can answer for you? I mean, you can zoom in and look at it. There's nowhere for me to park.
There's alley access, there's parking in behind. Do you have a garage back there? I know most of the residents back here have a garage and access from the alley. When I
It would create more problem if I park in the alley and try to get in from there because I have no way to transfer the kids or car seats or anything like that. Because the
But there is
garage
space-
is not locked
there is
into the
space for
house.
you to park back there.
It's fenced in. So it would create more problem if I park in the alley and try to carry my groceries and everything else, because garage is not connected to the house.
Okay.
So that creates another problem in itself. My recommendation is leave it as it is. And if you can clear the area more to allow the parking to occur better on the west side, we'll solve the problem. There's plenty of room to make a parking available on the west side. I understand you're saying there's a private property, but it's still further out. To alleviate the problem of the multifamily dwellings that are on the corner at Richardson and Hayes, and my property and other properties, and multiple cars and visitors especially, I should bring that up to you guys. When there's visitors at any of the locations, where do they go? I can't have birthday parties, I can't have get-together, I can't have family reunions, unless I have a place to park. The west side allows us to do that. And I'm requesting not to take that away, expand it, make it better, maybe put it under city control, but not take away any spots that are there right now. And also at the same time, send a notice to everybody on that side, on east side, that that's free game. Anybody can park anywhere they want on east side. It's not looked up as that. I parked in multifamily dwelling and I've gotten nasty notes on my car stating, move your car or we're gonna have it towed. But in fact, I know on east
It can't be
side,
towed, it's parked legally, so it's on the
East side.
Right.
it can't be towed, I know, but they think they own that front of their house, home on east side of the Hayes or Richardson Street, when in fact it's a city lot or city restricted or whatever, item. So that can also has to be done to let everybody know on that 5 units that anybody should be able to park on east side, first come, first serve.
I agree, I mean.
And
it's
police
in the
will be
city
called-
ordinance, right.
Police will be called every day, I guarantee you.
but I don't think we've ever towed a vehicle from there from park.
But I've gotten a notice, I wish I had brought it with me, that says, do not park in front of my house.
And if there's a problem, by all means, call us and.
No, it just leads you into another problem,
Sure.
right?
I understand.
From one survey being negative to 3 or 4 surveys that says, we have no problem, to emergency vehicle issue that I don't think I've ever seen having a
To me, that's the most
blockage.
important thing now, is the emergency vehicle situation.
There's plenty of room.
You got cars on both sides, try to get a fire truck down there when your house is on fire.
Not a problem.
No, it's not a problem. If your house is on fire and the truck can't get through because there's cars parked on both sides.
It's still a street and a half wide lane. It's
Okay,
open.
Fire truck puts down outriggers,
Mhm.
cars everywhere. How's the fire truck puts outriggers down?
Mhm. I understand.
Okay.
I'm an engineer.
All right.
So to alleviate if you have unlimited funds and unlimited resources, of course, make it 2 wide, 2.5 wide, make it, paved streets, parking. Yeah, but we have to live with whatever resources we have. So at the same time, we can have somebody do a survey on it with understanding that if these were in fact parking spots, do you still have enough room for a fire truck to put itself in it and riggers? I'll be more concerned about that turn for the fire truck than the parking or the throughway through that road when the house is on fire. Because that turn is worse. I don't even think if there's no cars in the parking anywhere, fire truck would have a hard time making that turn.
I've heard you. I understand what you're saying.
At the Richardson as it turns into the curve. So city should look into that
And I think.
and note it.
I think that helps make our point is the fact that there has been trailers and vehicles all parked up to the curb, which would make it impossible for the fire truck to make that curve.
Curve,
So,
not the street.
so if you alleviate that, no parking on that north side, no parking on that west side, then there's no doubt, right? That truck can make that curve and get by there.
And at the same time, we have to make sure where you put the sign, you're not
I
blocking the fire truck with their riggers in the way. Because you could solve the problem by putting a sign up there, yes, find the people that park there, but then you create another problem when the truck really does want to get in, fire truck. They can't put the riggers out because these poles have been put in a spot where the car would have been in the first place, would have been fine. So yes, I suggest you put something on the curb, make the curb better for the fire truck, and leave the west side alone. I don't have any problem with the west side. And you can have a survey guy come, I'll pay for the survey if you want me to send you whatever you need to show you that there is no problem with the size of the fire truck that you guys own and that will be available for my purpose of saving my house or my neighbors.
Is the fire department weighed in on this?
have
I
not
already
heard.
talked to Chief.
I'm sorry?
What's that?
Pre-meeting.
Again,
I think that
I
was.
take enough time of you this evening, especially Monday. But yeah, my suggestion is look at the curb, look at the west side a little bit more. And if you want to put some signs, put on the west side. And yes, we'll do better job of putting cars, but not heavy equipment or trailer in the future in that west side. So it doesn't take any more room than minimal required. Maybe it could be compact or subcompact cars only sign. Parking for compacts, parking for subcompact, that could be a solution. Okay? I mean, I'm just trying to give you some options that solves what we need as a resident of that street to have basic parking needs when we have get-togethers and, somebody drops things off, Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So Jessica, we're talking, the proposal is the west side of Richardson and the north side of Vine to the alley, is that what we're talking about?
Yes, so right here, as I'm showing along
Yeah.
here, that section right there.
Someone else wanted to speak on this?
I'm Larry Bradley. I live at 161 Richardson Street. And I think that if they say the street's not wide enough for 2 cars, then they should make it one way and leave our parking spaces alone. That would be probably the easiest. And then at the other end of the street, where it turns into Vine, Vine goes to Cheshire. If they zoom in on it, there's been 3 accidents there that, that, to me, that would be a true issue. And there's nothing ever been done about that because the truck parks right on the corner.
The one
So
we're
you
looking at
can-
right there.
Yeah, so you can't see that way. You can't see to the south. And there's been 3 accidents. there, and there's never been nothing said or done about that. So I think you could do both problems by making that a one-way. So then you don't have to worry about the two cars passing, not being able to pass. Plus, you don't have to worry about the truck being parked on the corner.
Thank you. Anyone else on this issue? So Captain, we've only got one response from the surveys that we sent out. We haven't heard any others.
Yes, we had one response.
Okay.
She basically agreed that the parking should be taken off the west side.
But going back to the first gentleman's, we don't know what started the whole conversation.
I do not know.
Okay, all right.
No, sir. Chief Pijanowski basically said it was an emergency vehicle situation where the street was too narrow. So I'm not sure exactly how the complaint originated.
I think we need to talk to you.
That's not what that's not even what.
You gotta come up at the table if you're gonna talk. It's being recorded.
The paper about the complaint says nothing about emergency vehicles. It's, just says that, two cars can't pass.
The paper that you got through this,
Yes.
through the survey?
Yeah.
I think we definitely would talk to both chiefs about it.
Oh,
And I've lived there for 12 years and there's never been no issue about no fire trucks ever. And there's the squad and stuff used to come to next door all the time. So there's never been an issue on
Yeah, I think
emergency vehicles getting out there. Fire trucks has even been there. So,
Has been?
yeah. So there's never been no issue like that.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. I think we'd like to get feedback from the fire department and the chief on this issue before we move forward with it.
I'd like to find out what started the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And to address Mr. Bradley's issue with that truck. And
Right. You could zoom down on the corner and see, because I've worked for City of Columbus for 19 years and I know that you're supposed to be like so many feet from the corner. And there's been actually 4 accidents. I was in one of them, but there was a car, his truck was parked there and there was a van parked on the sidewalk the other side. And that they've still never put their signs up. And I called the city, I don't know how many times on something like that. Even called the cops. So,
We're going to get some more information for you in this.
okay.
Thank you.
But that would be one of the biggest issues on the corner because there've been 4 wrecks.
In regards to that, this is the first I've heard about that issue at the corner there. That is something that we can post a no parking at the corner based on the codified ordinances very easily. I don't know if it will solve, by codified ordinance, we can be about 20 feet from that intersection. So I think that might help a little bit. It may not address the complete concern.
And
that
what
you-
street is that again right now?
This is Cheshire
Okay,
Street.
that's what I thought.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's something that we can do to see if it'll help alleviate the issue.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and get that in the works. Yep.
Thanks.
Awesome.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Item number 5 is discussion and consideration of traffic calming measures at the corner of Cobblestone Drive and Canal Street.
I'll take this one. We received an email from a resident in the area that had requested a multi-way stop at the intersection of Cobblestone and Canal. We've since did a multi-way stop warrant analysis, which Elaine had provided with you before the meeting, not recommending the installation of a multi-way stop sign based on the OMI-TCD warrants. We also did some the speed studies as we typically do. 85th percentile speeds are typical around 31, at most 32 miles per hour through that section. One other thing we do want to mention with the multi-way stop, we did some additional study with the recent one that was installed at Carson Farms in Cobblestone. And we found that the compliance with people actually stopping at the stop sign is very minimal. We're talking probably 20 to 30% of the actual vehicles that travel through the intersection come to a complete stop.
You talking about rolling stop they're doing?
Yes, they're doing a roll and stop. And we also compared it to a warranted multi-way stop within the city limits at Park Avenue and South Liberty Street, where we had a compliance rate of 72%. So you can see the difference of a warranted versus a non-warranted. So at this point, we don't recommend a multi-way stop. I guess we are still looking at the dynamic speed feedback signs, which we're hoping by our next meeting, we should have an updated memo, or at least a draft memo of our findings of that. to see if those help with speeding or traffic calming of any sorts. We're also looking at, potential use of bump outs, curb bump outs and stuff to help with these issues. So we're looking at different alternatives. We're just not recommending a multi-way stop at the location at this point, so.
So when we've got those intersections where we did a four-way stop, and, I mean, are we enforcing the fact that if only 20% of people are stopping, we gotta be writing some tickets out there, right? I mean, whether it's a warranted stop sign or not, once we put it in, I expect people to stop, right?
Yeah.
So do we do enforcement on those?
Yeah, we've been enforcing, just looking through here, the Cobblestone, Carson Farm stop
Okay,
sign.
good.
We've been doing some enforcement on that. I think the thing from the police department is we're looking at research now that says actually putting a stop sign someplace where it's not indicated it should go may actually increase the speed in certain other areas of the road because of acceleration.
Because they have to stop and make up that
Right.
3 seconds.
I know this is always a tough issue because so many of our residential neighborhoods, especially like that, where you've got a long new residential road and people speed. We want to do something to deal with it, and stop signs seem like a good idea, but there's always a downside when it's one of these unwarranted situations. So you guys are going to do some more research on this?
Yeah, we're going to do some more research. Like I said, we're going to have that draft memo, hopefully by our next meeting, for the dynamic speed feedback signs to see what the outcome of those are.
Good.
Maybe that could
The
be
next
an
parking
answer.
safety meeting, Jessica? I'm
Yes,
sorry. Okay.
yep, the next parking and safety meeting. And we're also, with the Hall Drive and different areas down there, we're looking at the curb bump outs. And additionally, we're also looking at any new subdivision to alleviate issues like this, possibly implementing those kind of things with the developer at the very beginning, because it's a lot easier, low cost to implement something like that before it's even constructed,
So you've
so.
got so many, I've been on this committee ever since I've been on council, and this comes up almost every meeting somewhere in the city, these
Yeah.
kind of concerns. So.
And two, the striping, we've tried over there on Bueller Drive. We have found that did help with the accidents. We haven't had any accidents at that curve. The speed, though, it's about the same. I guess if we have eliminated the accidents, I think that's a positive outcome of that. So trying these different scenarios, and we'll find out what works the best. So.
Okay, good. Is anybody here to speak on this issue? Okay, we'll look forward to hearing from you next time. Thank you.
That's okay, I didn't realize, I thought it was more of a, sorry, I probably should,
Yeah.
If you want to speak, we'll need you to give your name and address for the record. You can come to the table.
no, thank you, I'm fair.
Yeah, I mean, we're always happy to hear from you, so.
I know.
Okay. Anything else, Chris, on that? She's coming up. Oh,
My name is Mary Lou Lovell, and I live at 661 Cobblestone. I'm concerned there. You said when they track the miles per hour, you said it was at 31, and the speed limit there is 25. My concern is it's a residential area with lots of children crossing the street, biking, waiting for buses in the morning when it's dark. As well as when you're driving. I live right near the area, two houses down from where Ellicott is being developed in there. So I've lived there about 2 years, and during that time, there has been an increase, of course, in traffic, and there's been an increase in the speed of the traffic coming through there, predominantly in the morning and in the late afternoon and evening, when people are going to and from work. They just kind of zoom through there like it's an open highway. And I'm really concerned with the safety about that. And when you say that, most of the people are going 31 and they're not stopping necessarily at that stop sign that's down a little farther than the Canal Street that you were talking about possibly putting in, that it just allows people to keep on going at that speed. And if they're not stopping for this, what can we do so that they would? I know you mentioned bumps in the street, but.
Curb bump outs.
Is that the area right there we're talking about where you just
Yes,
pulled in?
here's Carson Farms Boulevard and
Right.
Hayfield, where we put the multi-way stop, and Canal is right here.
Okay.
So here's Ellicott and Ridgefield down here, the new area that was
Okay, so the
recently.
stop sign we dealt with last time is right there at Carson Farms?
Right here.
And where's the next stop sign at? You know?
There, It would be at Hauk Road here, would be the next, and then
All the
as
way-
this dead's end, yes, so.
Yeah, see, that's, I'm sorry, man, I'll let you finish before I start yapping. You finish.
I think I said what I wanted to. Jamie?
I'm gonna-
Okay.
So you set the precedent.
My name is Toby West. I live at 679 Cobblestone. If you pan towards Hauk, you can see Harmony goes off of Cobblestone to the south, and I'm the third house. There we are. Yep. So you can see how much of a straightaway that is. And I think part of the issue too is there are no driveways on the other side of our road at all. Once you get past, what is that? No, that one is Canal. So there are no driveways that open up to the road, so it just feels to drivers like a highway, I think. And so I was almost a little disappointed that the new builds were built, they're built sideways there at those. Again, no new driveways, so it just still feels like, I mean, there are, that's only like 10 houses on our side of the street that are on that part, and it doesn't feel residential to the people that are going down that road, and they do fly. So it is a very big concern. I've been there 6 years. 6 years ago yesterday, I think, actually. And I attended some meetings initially about this. I know the bumps can't go in because of emergency vehicles. I am aware of that. I know that they said putting in a stop sign, actually, I remember them saying that putting in a stop sign makes drivers speed up once they get past that stop sign. I was actually curious to find out if we have any data that supports that with the Carson Farms stop sign. But again, that area is just a little more crowded and probably feels less like a highway at that intersection. I don't know if they have the speed issues in that part of Cobblestone as much as we would in our stretch. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Well, I know when we heard from them, when we discussed that stop time, we heard the same kinds of things. So I think it's pretty much.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, I've been on this committee as long as I've been on council too, and Cobblestone, all due respect to who lives in Cobblestone, we did something horribly wrong when we built that street. I mean, it's constantly speeding issue with Cobblestone since the day I've been on council. And so whatever and this is a critique of engineering, but that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, and what you said about, Captain, about the speeding, now isn't it typically though, after a sign is put in, after they've gone 6 years without a sign being there, if those signs have been there all along, is it still the same data that people still speed up between stop signs? I've heard it before from safety forces that, you know, they've gone so many years without one being there, put one in, they think they have to pick up that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's two concerns, at least, and I don't know what the long-term research has been on it, just the short-term. I think what you were saying, what, 72% roll through?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's, that's a concern because also at times could give a false sense of security. You're going through the crosswalk and somebody rolls it or doesn't know it's there. And so there's that concern as well. So
I just think it's crazy that from Hauk Road all the way down to Firestone back in the day, there was maybe 1 or 2 stop signs that whole way. That's a long stretch of road. So we did a poor job, in my opinion, as a city when we planned that street out like that with all these residential, all these single family homes, you know.
And I'll give my honest opinion. I think this is one of those perfect candidates for some type of curb bump outs or something to narrow the feel of the street. If you drive in Dublin to Tara Hill or even down off of River Road that's in between Sawmill Parkway, just the feeling of the curves out or even things around you will help you. It makes you go the right speed because you're afraid to go over just because of all the different things going on around you. It makes you help pay a lot closer attention. The issue in this is just we'll have to identify funding of some sort to be able to implement something like
But
that.
we can look at this case as well, if it's not
Absolutely.
some sort of measure to,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, I just think it's crazy how long that strip is.
Yeah, and we've got not just Cobblestone, but other areas that we continue to hear this about. It's just a really difficult issue because stop sign and speed bumps seem like the right thing, but they aren't always. I mean, the good news is that we've got you guys who are experts and you're constantly, looking for solutions. So we'll look forward to hearing back from you on what our options are. But this and Hull Drive and a lot of these other ones, we'll find some funding. I mean, we need to take some action. We just want to make sure what we do is the right thing to do. So.
And one thing, we are about ready to be done with the pilot program for the dynamic speed feedback signs. So we will plan on the first street that we put it on after we're done with that. We'll stick it out on this street to see what kind of effects it has on traffic there too. So.
Anyone else on cobblestone? Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is discussion and consideration of parking restrictions on West Fountain Avenue.
That's me.
Okay.
Is Mr. Jackson here? Okay. I'm Mr. Jackson. So we received a complaint from Mr. Jackson about double parking on West Fountain Avenue between Forest and Euclid Avenue, that there was a difficulty in backing out of the driveway. So we went up there and looked, and of course we didn't see anything, so we weren't prepared to make a recommendation. However, then we realized that Delaware Hayes was on spring break. So we went back and resurveyed it again, and there were 3 vehicles from Sandusky Street or Liberty, from Liberty to Forest, and 27 vehicles between Forest and Euclid on both sides of the road. So when we did back and forth, it is tough, especially from the north side backing out south into the street. Unfortunately, because we didn't realize it was the spring break, we didn't get send notices out to everybody else in the neighborhood.
Okay.
We are recommending that one side of the street be no parking from 7 a.m. in the morning until 4 o'clock. When we went back after 3:30, all those vehicles were gone, and the street's pretty cleaned up with that. So
Are we planning on sending out a survey now?
we can. I want to make sure you understood that we
hadn't
got everybody in the
I remember
neighborhood yet.
reading it here that you said you went out there, they were on spring break, which obviously is a major change. But if we're before we move ahead with this, I'd feel more comfortable if we send the surveys out.
Yeah, just can you pull up that area? real quick?
Yes. Yep.
So, obviously it's the Hayes students parking on both sides. Yeah, I've always thought that was a problem.
Yeah.
Just trying to get a fire truck down there.
You want me some comments, sir?
If you're going to recommend it, I guess there's no point in my saying.
Well, you're welcome to. We just need your name and address for the record.
Well, there are 2 problems.
So for the record, we got to get your name and address on the recording.
Pardon me?
We need your name and address for the recording.
Oh, address 270 West Fountain,
And your name?
Richard Jackson.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir. You're good.
Go ahead. Okay, well, picture this. I back out of my driveway. There's somebody parked directly across from my driveway, and then 2 people on either side there. Then I've got somebody parked right up against my driveway here on my side, on both of them. So I got to back out. And I back out, and I get here, and you never know whether there's somebody coming down what is now effectively a 1-lane street here. But you continue backing out, and you have to worry about how you're going to do that, because you have to back into what is basically now a 1-lane with a car here that you just as soon not hit, and one here that you just as soon not hit. And those are your 2 choices. And the trouble is, if I hit one of them, it'll be my fault. That's one problem. The other problem is, once you're out there, if I want to go up to Euclid and I get halfway up there with cars on either side like they are in 1 lane, and somebody's coming down Euclid, he can't see me, so he turns in. Now here we are, head to head. And for him to back up, he'd have to back and turn. There's probably somebody already parked here now. And I have to back down past all these people on either side. It's surprising that there haven't been more fender benders. It's just a dangerous situation.
Do we know, I don't think I want to picture this, Captain, but for the students to park it, because right there's a school, do they have to pay like a yearly parking fee to park in the parking lot at the school? Do they? Oh, yeah, like, so this is the show, they don't want to pay the parking, so they park on the side street, right?
Well, there's limited parking. It goes to seniors first, and
Oh, it
then
does?
whatever
Okay.
is left over goes to juniors, but you also have sophomores.
But the parking lot's, I mean,
It's,
it's
so
full?
not all the juniors are guaranteed a spot. It goes into like a.
But the parking at the school is full for students,
Yeah.
okay.
Just experience, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Just an added thought, it seems to me I was paying more to the school system so they could have that parking lot. I don't know why they don't let them use it, but I don't understand it. Why the students have to pay to park in their own parking lot. So no wonder they'd rather park on my street.
I'll also add, in addition to what he was saying about backing out of driveways, there was an accident in 2016 of somebody backing out of their driveway at 255 West Fountain that did run into a car. So there is an accident history plus the issue he states there, so.
Well, the other concern I have, Captain, is even though I think we're all in agreement that that's, we're glad that the police department's recommending to agree with you, but I think 7 to 4, you see the same thing on game nights too. Whether it's a football game or a basketball game, it's the same way over there too. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not only during the day. We do have a big crowd when there's another game going on, but then I'm not going anyplace in the evening. I'm not alone on this. I have a neighbor that has something to say to you about it too, I would imagine.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
You're done with me.
He's in charge. If you're done with us,
Well, you are in the center. I guess I should have been addressing you.
that's quite all right. Thank you.
I think Dick would like to come down and show you some pictures.
Absolutely. As long as he gives us his name and address, he's good to go.
Okay, my name is Dick Brulot, and I live at 292 West Valentin. I've been there since 1980. Taught at Hayes for 26 years, so I'm well acquainted with students. And until about the last 4 years, we really haven't had too much student parking. This year has been particularly bad. I can be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and by 6:20, I have students parking on the opposite side of the street. I'm on the north side, they're parking on the south side. And they get out and they go to school. Now, whether it's one of these classes that meets real early, or maybe they're going for weight training or something else, but they are there early. By 7 o'clock, it's probably from the corner of Euclid down about 4 houses at least where you have solid cars on the north side, and you have pretty solid cars now on the south side. And as Mr. Jackson said, when you come out of your driveway, you've got a car dead set opposite your driveway on the south side. This morning, for the 5th time this school year, I had a car that extended at least 2.5 feet over my driveway. And it's like, okay, on the other side, I have a light pole, so I can figure out I can hit the light pole or I can hit their car. I usually, if it's just a little ways, I usually leave them a note. I have one obstinate parker who parked there several times, and I finally said, you park here one more time, you get towed. And I never saw him back, but he moved down about 3 houses. I called the school today. Within an hour, they were there. It was a tight fit to get out of my driveway. And as Mr. Jackson said, with a car there, I had him over the extension of my driveway by over 2 feet. And you're trying to get out, and invariably as you're trying to back out, there's a car coming down, so you pull back into the driveway. Part of the problem is the kids have no idea that there is an offset from the driveway. I think what's supposed to be 5 feet from the driveway for parking?
I'd have to look at it.
I think it used to be. And invariably, and I know it happens to Mr. Jackson, and I know it happens the other driveways right along there. They'll park right at the edge of the driveway so that you have to come straight out.
Does it cover your mailbox too? I mean, in front of
Well,
your mailbox too?
Well, the mailbox is on the house.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a walking mailman. So he just delivers right at the front door. But it just, you have to back straight out, and then you sort of end up jockeying to get your car far enough to go. I hardly think, it's never happened during school hours, but I hardly think a fire truck would be able to get down between Euclid and halfway down the block. If you've ever gone down when we've had the horse parade, you'll know how bad that is, where we've even had police cars have to back down about half a block before they could turn around and go the opposite direction. I just like to see them leave more distance from the driveways and just make it a little bit easier. You will have a car leave every so often, but kids come all day long. And they've got more parking now at Hayes than they ever did, and it's a real cheap parking pass. There's no reason why they have to park on the street. I know from talking to some of the kids, and I see on the cars stickers like Columbus State. So you have the kids who are doing high school and going part of the day for college classes. So they don't want to have to get stuck in a parking lot if everybody's leaving at the same time. Matter of fact, today I got stuck, just about all the way down the end of the block because school was out and was car after car pulling out, and I couldn't get through until they finally finished. So, but whatever you could do would help. I think maybe a certain time, like you recommend, would actually help a lot. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. This happens to me like 3 times a year, and it sets me into a panic. I can imagine every single day living like that. Yeah, I
I think we all agree we need to do something. My only concern is that we don't let the residents know ahead of time.
I agree.
But I don't want to do it, and then all of a sudden we're flooded with people coming down here that didn't know what's going to happen. So if we can do that, and hopefully by next time, we'll be able to act on this and get something done. Anybody else on this issue? Okay. Item number 7 is discussion and consideration of recommendations from the Downtown Parking Advocacy Committee, the enforcement work group, in regard to extended days and hours of parking enforcement, expanding time limited parking to 3 hours, and changing the fine structure. And I'm assuming, Captain, that you're going to go over some of these recommendations from the committee.
Yes, sir.
Before we do, I just want to point out to everybody that these recommendations and a number of others came from a study that we paid to have done by MKSK Consultants. They're urban planning consultants with a great reputation. Matter of fact, the county has just recently hired them to do the 3637 Economic Development Corridor Study. So they spend a considerable amount of time in downtown Delaware talking to people, people using the parking, businesses, residents, et cetera, doing drone flyovers and a number of other things. They've done an extensive job of research in order to make these recommendations. So we're at the point now where we're starting to move forward with some of the recommendations that we can implement in a timely manner. Others will require more time and more funding. Everybody wants to see a parking garage. That's on the list, but it's not at the top of the list because we can do other things before we spend the money for a parking garage. And we realize that no matter what we do, any decision we make about a change in parking benefits some people is a detriment to others. My goal from the beginning of this and continues to be that I want to make sure, knowing that we're going to make decisions that not everybody's going to be happy with, but I want to make sure that we have sufficient input from the people that are most impacted, which are business owners, downtown businesses, property owners, residents who live downtown. So we're going to take time, in addition to tonight, me personally, to meet with people because I want to make sure that once we move ahead with recommendations, we at least feel like we've got as much input as we can. And again, maybe not everybody's going to be happy, but we're going to, at that point, hopefully be in a position to make the best decisions that we can. So that as a preface, Captain will hear from the committee and then we'll open it up to comment.
The committee looked at the surveys and consultants' recommendations. The enforcement committee recommended originally for Monday through Friday, 8 to 8 enforcement, and Saturday, 10 to 8. They received some more input from the community, and at this time are recommending Monday through Friday, 8 to 8.
Not Saturday.
Not Saturday, that's correct.
Say that last part again. So the committee, the enforcement committee recommended 8 to 8, 10 to 8. And then who said no Saturday?
Then they had, was not well received.
Okay.
They had plenty of input from the community that didn't like the Saturday hours. And so the committee then amended their recommendation to show Monday through Friday, 8 to 8.
Okay.
You know, want to talk about the fine structure?
Oh, okay. So they extended the 3-hour limit, which was the next on the list, was extending the 2-hour time limit to the 3-hour time limit.
Are you talking, these are the unmetered spaces on Sandusky and Winter Street?
That's correct. Okay. And that came through on 35302. Basically, City Council has already established those parking spaces, and then it's under the management and supervision of the city manager. So the recommendation was that we move all of the 2-hour spaces to 3 hours. And then the last one is the fine structure. Currently, overtime meters are $7 to $10. The overtime limit on the free spaces is $45. The committee had 2 recommendations: either make both $25 for the over the limit, which is the free spaces, and overtime, which is the parking meter spaces, or make the over the limit, which is the free parking space, $40, and the overtime meters $20. It was equal recommendation on those 2 things.
So 25 for both, and then 40, 45.
40 or 20.
I mean, yeah, 20 and 40. Right. Okay.
Why don't we have people here who want to provide input on this, and we'll just ask it. Whoever wants to go first, give us your name and address for the record, and we'll stay until everybody's had a chance to talk.
Everybody knows who you are, Joe. You want some help? I'll come up and sit next to you.
Okay. You got my back. I'm Joe Diamond, 153 North Washington Street. I own or represent at least 15 properties in the commercial properties in the downtown. Have about 20 commercial tenants that I represent, as well as half a dozen apartments. And some of what you're talking about had is a major impact on what we do in the downtown. And some of that, I was disappointed. I thought initially the consultant did a nice job and had some good ideas, but there's some aspects of what they're talking about I don't think makes a lot of sense. Extension of hours to 8 o'clock, I do not understand why we would be doing that. I think that the 5 o'clock cutoff makes sense once we get customers in to our businesses. They're pretty much, if they're going to dinner or shopping or going to the theater, that they're in pretty much for the night. And to have to say, okay, for 3 hours, we got to continue paying for that. The other aspect of it is what we did 20, 25 years ago with the apartments that we've constructed in the downtown. We based that on the fact that none of our buildings in the downtown have parking. And we have been using either lots as part of that. The 10-hour parking has been a good solution for that. Most of my tenants buy either permits so that they can park in the long-term lots as part of that, or most of the tenants I have now are young professionals, and work 8 to 5. So they come in after 5 o'clock and have the ability to park until the next morning on the parking lots. I don't know what we're going to do if we go to 8 o'clock and where those tenants are going to go at this point. I think the other aspect that we have to look at, because I do know the other end of part of this discussion too was the elimination of the 10-hour parking spaces in those lots. And I was with the city at the time. We created all those 10-hour spots and trying to get them not to park on the street. And those have worked really well. Of course, with the situation with the health of the city and the benefits of what has come about, and it's a very good problem to have, the lack of parking. But we also need parking, long-term parking for our employees and our tenants. Where did they go? And I think before we eliminate, just blanket do elimination of those 10-hour spots, then we're going to need to look at where those people are going to go and some kind of plan beforehand, and not just simply all of a sudden as next week the 10 hours are gone. Just
to clarify, no 10-hour spots are going to be eliminated. What the parking consultants recommended is that we want turnover on those metered parking lots. And so those are places where people will likely park to go to restaurants, to go to businesses, those kinds of things. So what they suggested is that we not reduce the 10-hour spots at all, but move the 10-hour spots off of those 3 lots, the Franklin Street lot, basically we call it 1808 or
where are they going to go then?
On the streets. We're going to add additional parking on the streets.
Okay.
As close to those areas as we can. I mean, again, it's one of those things that not everybody's going to be happy, but we felt the consultants made a good point in that we want turnover, because what they did was they were monitoring those lots and people were parking there, there was hardly any left for turnover.
I sat on that and saw the studies on that. So I realized that.
Right.
But, as a solution, again, we have not really had input back as the general public as part of that. And our concerns at this point is some of this stuff is just going to happen, and we have not seen real solutions at this point in time. The other aspect that, and kind of the final thing, is looking at the fine structure. And the fine structure is killing us. This $40 parking, that it's hard enough if you can go down to the shopping center and park for free. And for our tenants to have somebody come in from outside, doesn't realize it, or is over a couple minutes and ends up with a $40 ticket. A lot of our tenants end up trying to take care of that customer, ends up eating that $40 ticket. I realize what we're trying to do is to keep some of these parkers, and we have some blatant occupants in the downtown that roll forward and play some games as far as the parking goes, or eat the ticket simply because that's part of doing business. But $40 I think is unreasonable. I think we ought to be looking maybe for first time violators, that's a $10 fine, and then looking, we had looked at computer systems where we could identify blatant violators, and where we do a step situation with the second steps up to a fairly stiff fine, and then third maybe goes even to $100 to stop people from using that as cost. But some way we need to try and try to be a little bit better for our outside parkers, and so that you don't get hit with that kind of a parking situation. I don't think it's going to do, it's not advantageous to us. I think I realize we're trying to get them to turn over, but there ought to be some ways of doing that and keeping track of who is parking on a regular basis in that manner as part of it. So, but anyways, there's some of the things we really need to look at as part of it. It does have major impact. I think the aspect of moving hours longer, what I see happening there, if we start enforcing to 8 o'clock, then we're going to need another parking enforcement officer, and the cost of doing that. And it's like, why would we do this for the down? And what are we really trying to do by enforcing to 8 o'clock?
I don't remember the survey. What was the rationale behind that?
I don't remember.
I don't think there really was one. That was simply, it was simply trying to do turnover. And like I say, I think once we get in and we, like I say, you have to look at the difference in the daytime business and what happens about 5 o'clock. And at that point, we're starting to see the restaurants fill up totally and some of the other businesses. And at that point, we're losing a lot of the retail, but most of our business today is restaurant in the downtown food industry. And, it's beverage and we need to be able to take care of those people. And I think that, looking to that long-term, to 8 o'clock, it's like, why are we doing this? I think the cost to run and obviously even, with fine structure and meters and stuff, I still don't see that that's as advantageous and it's going to be healthy for the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Smiles, live at 193 North Sandusky. More importantly, I own the Greater Gouda at 12 North Sandusky and the building at 12 North Sandusky. And Joe Diamond is absolutely right. You should listen to everything he just said. Seriously. Yeah. What you're proposing now will not make any difference. It just makes people, more angry about, at least in my experience with people, if you get a ticket here and you're talking about raising it, they may never come back. So Joe has had a long history of working, with the parking things, and I don't disagree with anything he said. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is David Kessler. I live at 4151 State Route 203 in Radnor, but I own the Sandusky Street Antiques building and the business at 30 North Sandusky. What Joe Diamond had to say is right on, but I too have paid fines for some of my customers that come in. We have dealers from 9 states that come in to buy antiques. We have a quality antique shop, and we relish our business that we get. And when they get a $40 fine because they've been there for 2.5 hours shopping and they're spending a lot of money, it gets a little embarrassing. As a matter of fact, we lost one of our dealers from Indianapolis, said he's never coming back. We just can't afford to do that in a small business. And I think that, the 8 o'clock thing is going to, I just think it's a bad idea. Everybody, when they found out about the recommendations that were coming down, everybody's saying, it sounds like a money grab to me. And are they going to be out after dark in the wintertime writing tickets? And, I said, well, that's probably what they're going to be doing. So it just doesn't look good. I think, the city of Delaware has come a long way. People come from miles around here. This is a wonderful little town. People say, how'd you get such a good little town? It's great. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't. And we've been here 35 years now. So it's just, I think we need to be careful what we do. I think the long range thing is we've got to put a parking deck in. Like it or not, we're going to have to do that because the downtown is going to continue to develop. We are known as the north thing from Columbus. Yeah. Because they can get there. There's shops to go to. We have wonderful restaurants, and there's a couple more restaurants that want to come to town. I think we need to protect that. People like to come in and have dinner and do some shopping, whatever they want to do. And we start writing tickets, we're going to drive them away. We had some people in from Medina, Ohio, and they said, we can't believe this. They were there on the first Friday, and Main Street's got that so well organized. There was like 5,000 people downtown. They couldn't believe it. They went home and said, oh my God, we got to do something. So just protect what we've got. We've got, we have merchants there. We got to protect them as well as, open it up so we can get more public in even. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Duvall. I live at 5667 Plantation Road near Sunbury, Ohio. I own the building at 5 and 7 North Sandusky Street, and I'm the proprietor of Son of Thurman. I would tend to echo what the previous folks have had to say regarding their comments. This is, when I opened up here almost 4.5 years ago now, all those articles were written by Business First, and it's continually been a subject in the restaurant industry and in the entertainment industry in Central Ohio in general that Delaware is on the make, and that at the time I made the comment that I thought that the Wayne Gretzky quote, we were skating to where the puck is going to be, and that's been true. That's been proven true. I think that what you have to look at is, again, echoing what the other folks have said, is that you have to not only look at, the logistic issues that we're fighting here in terms of parking, in terms of, turnover and what a consultancy, produces in terms of how to get, the correct results. I mean, me personally, I need people for about 2 hours, so 3 hours, man, whatever. But you have to recognize that each individual business here is part of a much larger organism. I am always thrilled when somebody new comes to town. And I think there's a great cooperation between all the businesses downtown. Sure, we have our skirmishes over this, that, or the other, trash dumpsters, what have you. But you have to look at the message it sends to someone who's going to come from an hour away, 2 hours away, because that happens far more than I ever anticipated it would. Sometimes, you have an experience in business where, wow, I can't believe a customer was that upset about, this minor detail or that minor detail. Well, I think it's the same principle at work. Somebody comes in from out of town. Well, they got no parking and they really rack you, until 8 o'clock if you do or don't. Do we want to be known as a place where you can go get a bite to eat at a restaurant or go hit an antique store? No. We want to be known as a place where, we're an entertainment center, a place of leisure, a place for people to come spend money at several different establishments over the course of an evening, over the course of a weekend day. And to have to jam all that within 2 or 3 hours, otherwise you'll get stuck with a fine. I don't know. I think I appreciate what, efficiency experts, whoever's been contracted to look at this has to say, but at the same time, I think we also have to perhaps look in other directions. Something that, I've had conversations with folks about, and this goes against every fiber of my being a libertarian, but, there are an awful lot of privately owned lots that go unused on the weekends, and people's property is people's property. They can do whatever they like with it. But has the city looked at ways to possibly encourage the use of those privately owned lots, incentivize the use of those privately owned lots during off hours, whatnot? I think that more would be gained by that than, any sort of aggressive fine structure or, and obviously, I mean, at some point the city is going to have to address, the city does want to continue to grow, adding more parking somehow, some ways, and hopefully that does make its way up the list. But anyway, mostly I'm repeating what folks said, but hey, I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus.
Well, before you go, one of the things that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and I'd like to get input from everyone on, is the idea of increasing those non-metered spots from 2 hours to 3 hours. I've heard people talk on both sides of the issue. Some say it's good, some say it's not. So I'd like to get some input on that as well, because that seems to me to be a major change too.
Yeah, it is a major change. And, the hours during which those are enforced are, obviously going to be during the weekdays, correct? Still continually. I don't see much difference between 2 hours and 3 hours. I'm sure there are arguments for both sides of it. Honestly, I think that, again, there are certain people who, habitual, folks that,
right,
that's been gone over ad infinitum. So, yeah, me personally, I've looked at that and I've tried to figure out what the pluses and minuses are of that. So, and it's difficult to render any type of forecast for that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Absolutely. Appreciate your input.
I'm going to try to come at this a little bit differently.
Name and address for the record. I know who you are, but the tape recorder needs to know.
I'm not as well known as Joe Diamond, I'm sure, but I'm probably a little bit more notorious than Mr. Diamond, I guess. Don Ranky, I guess I'll use 52 North Sandusky Street, or I could use 13. Several companies that I own quite a few properties downtown. Some of those same companies own parking lots downtown, own a variety of businesses downtown, and I probably have more institutional knowledge about your downtown than anybody else. So what I wanted to say is, I'm obviously concerned about doing away with any 10-hour spaces, because I have just between between Union and North Sandusky Street on East Winter, probably 40 apartments. I was actually, Chris, I got a couple good laughs about the parking truck and trying to get the stilts out, because, I sued the city. It's been a few years back. I sued the city over the same premise that, you can't block fire hydrants and have, you can't put vehicles on blocks and block fire hydrants, then expect the city to, get their fire departments. And of course, I think First Friday's great. The more stuff we can do downtown, I think is great. I'm not really sure I like being able to drink in designated areas downtown, especially when streets are closed for a variety of reasons. But we have grown, and in this, I moved here in 1985 and lived in the city for many, many, many years. My wife and I have renovated over, should know this because we just went to the estate attorney so that my kids can deal with this crap. See, Joe, you don't have that problem. You're gonna give it all away, I'm sure. Probably over 50, 60, 70 properties that I've owned in various companies that we've renovated and spent a lot of money in. And it's really helped the historic district, not only downtown, but also in the historic district, to raise property values. Obviously, about 12, 13 years ago, we went through a pretty major, I don't want to call it a depression, but that's really started coming back. And downtown has been very successful, and it's been very successful because of places like first 1808, and then places like Son of Thurman's. And there's just a variety of great restaurants. I mean, we just probably lost one of the finest restaurants, Veritas, which moved to Columbus because, quite frankly, pissed off with the city of Delaware. And they were the #1 rated restaurant 5 out of 6 of the past years. They moved. That's too bad. But 1808 still does well. The Mexican restaurants are doing really well, but there's a major parking problem. And there's a couple of very, very, very simple solutions. I mean, I'm going to jump back a little bit. When I was on city council way back 100 years ago, we did streetscape, and the city manager at the time was a guy by the name of Frank Cherokee, and he said, but there's no way in hell you're going to get a $400,000 grant. And we badly needed to redo our infrastructure downtown, the sewer lines and the water lines, and the sanitary water lines, as well as the water runoff lines, went into the Olentangy together because they were one line downtown. And I pushed to get that grant passed, went door to door, and they only hand out a few of those grants, and we were able to get that $400,000 or $600,000 grant. So that's what started being able to get the downtown sewer lines that hadn't been done, and the water lines, and so forth and so on. But in regards to the parking, you look back and you say, okay, what's happened? What's happened since 1985, and where are we today in 2018? And then what's going to happen between now and 2035? I can tell you, what's going to happen, and that is we've had substantial growth in this county. I mean, people brag about it all the time that Delaware County is one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. What they forget to tell you is that 96% of that is rooftop growth. And so the little bit of commercial and residential growth, basically, you know, a lot of it's been downtown because there were a lot of vacant spaces. So we've grown to this much bigger city. And now, as I think some of you know, I'm the treasurer and chief fiscal officer for the Delaware County Finance Authority. And we, are responsible for, the mall financing out the mall. We've been at the zoo. I mean, and we have right now, and that's going to grow exponentially, but right now we have about $10 million in really low interest bond money. And as you know, Kent, Joe and I were on that initial committee, but we weren't asked to be on any other committees thereafter. And I think, are you and I think we're the biggest property owners downtown, aren't we? And the gentleman from Thurman's that talked about, and I'm not going to call him out, maybe he's still here, he's not, I'll see him back there. He has, about the private parking lots, you have a private parking lot behind the Strand Movie Theater. Well, we just recently gave folks eviction notices. Now, over the time that I bought property downtown, I've never given anybody an easement to come across my property. And so the property that I went 26 North Sandusky Street, I called Mr. Bennington one day. You probably remember. Been around a little while.
A couple of years.
So I said, Mr. Bennington, I said, lease is 1923. Half of it's supposed to go to the property owner, and the other half is supposed to go into a fund to fix the parking lots downtown. So I said, I'd like to have my half going all the way back to 1923, and if you could have me a cashier's check by 4 o'clock this afternoon, I'd like to have it. Probably still a pretty funny story that goes around here, doesn't it? And so instead, he had somebody come out that afternoon and cut the meters off of those spaces that were on my property, which was the right thing to do. Still would have liked to have the one half of the money back to 1923. We have so many folks parking in our lot behind the Strand Movie Theater, and most of those people we rent spaces to, and we've tried to be pretty good about how much we've substantially increased it. I think we're up to $65 a month now, but we've had so many people parking back there that aren't supposed to parking back there, whether it's Roots, whether it's the shoe shop or the bakery. I'm not going to call anybody out too bad back here, but we have a variety of people that park in our lots back there, as well as we have a variety of people that park on our property behind 26. And that's just one example of what we have. But going back to the Delaware County Finance Authority, it was our idea from the original to build 3 or 4 small lots, 2-story lots with 10-foot setbacks. So there'd be some green space, because, we do have some pets downtown now, and they, don't really have much green space, but you do have some pets downtown. You have some folks who walk in their pets downtown that are from the historic district and the houses, whether it's Winter Street or Franklin Street or, whatever street it might be, William Street and so forth and so on. We've got this $10 million. Now, the crazy part about it is that the Delaware County Finance Authority, again, I'm the treasurer and the chief fiscal officer, we can do that ourselves. I mean, the city could come to us and say, okay, let's put a bunch of lots together. And of course, there's a lot that I own behind the Strand Movie thing. There's a lot that's owned by the city back there, and that make a great small parking lot. We could probably add 100 or 200 spaces.
Parking, garage parking decks.
You could use the first floor that's already there, and then obviously just add a single deck, have a couple, we own a bunch of property in New Orleans too, and down there, a pretty parking garage to where it's set back about 10, 15 feet. So you got the green spaces, the trees, and it's wrought iron, so it's not block. It's not going to be ugly after, 5 or 6 years. It's not spit face block. I mean, it's Rod Travis's, and it's really engineered really nicely. And it goes over into many different commercial areas, whether it's Panera Bread or whether it's this restaurant or this restaurant. And then it goes into apartments, and I even talked to Joe about we could take it and drop a stairway down next to the Strand if we get the air rights from Mr. Manos's daughter-in-law that owns the building there at the corner now, the air rights, and drop folks right into East Winter Street. And East Winter Street, because of all the restaurants, including the old Bag of Nails, it's a huge, it's probably the biggest problem we have. Plus we got the municipal, we have the police station over there. Unfortunately, crime has gone up since 1985. And so they're a little bit busier over there. So we have this money, we got this $10 million, and, it's sitting at, less than 2%. But the biggest thing is we could do it in conjunction, we being the Delaware County Finance Authority could do it in conjunction with the city. We pay no prevailing wage, zero, no prevailing wage, zero. And we pay no sales tax. We pay no sales tax. And so we probably would save 25% right off the get-go. And we could do one parking garage and have it started fairly quickly and see how that works out and eliminate the problem. But taking the 10-hour spaces away, what that does to me is not to me, because I don't deal with any of this. I deal with our nursing homes and retirement communities around town, around the country. And so my wife and a couple of folks within our offices deal with that. But we're starting to put eviction notices out in that lot we have behind the Strand Movie Theater, because we got people parking in there and we're going to have to start towing. Now, the bad thing about it is most of those people work out of the bank building there at Winter Street and Sandusky Street. And, they're already ticked off because there's 4 of them that got eviction notices and say we're done because we heard about the reduction of the 10-hour spaces, which is a real problem.
They're not reducing, they're moving.
Well, if you move them from where they are currently, okay, and you go with the enforcement to 8 to 8, they come home about 5:30 or 6, and they park in those 10-hour spaces. All right. And then they leave by 8 or 8:30 in the morning and free those spaces back up. I mean, what would be a better thing to do is have it from, 8 to 5 to where it was a 3-hour space, but after 5 p.m. to, 9 o'clock in the morning, it goes back to a 10-hour space, because you're going to get more apartments. Because here's the fact of the matter, and this is what scares me more than anything else, is that the growth in Ohio, 93% of it, it's either high 80s or low 90s. The majority of the growth in the state of Ohio over the next 10 years is going to be in one county, and that's Delaware County. Now think about that, 88 counties, and we're going to have 85 to 92% of the growth. Okay, now that's going to be good and bad. I think it's going to be bad because we don't really need any more rooftops. What we need to do is swing that pendulum from 96% rooftops down to about 91%, because that effectively would add to the county and the city's coffers well over $100 million a year in additional tax money they didn't have at all if we could just go commercial. The other thing that I'm scared to death about for downtown is that there are some retailers and some restaurateurs and some of these beer makers and so forth and so on that are doing quite well. There's others that are just barely hanging on by a thread. And just a niche the wrong way, a twitch the wrong way will put those folks out of business, and they've got to go. Now, I'm lucky, to have had really good tenants, and they have worked together in regards to parking issues. So I would, we had a couple months ago. I know Lisa wasn't very happy. I see she sits next to you. She wasn't real happy, but there was a presentation made by David States, who was the chairman of the Delaware County Finance Authority. You get somebody on your own city council that's now on that board, and I'd love to have a joint session between the Delaware County Finance Authority and Delaware City Council to talk specifically on how we could work together to do one small garage. Let's start it off. And then my last recommendation is I think you really ought to pass out the recommendations. I mean, anytime you call a committee enforcement, that's really not a good, enforcement is a very negative term, which means we're really not trying to figure out how to fix the parking problem. What we're trying to do is figure out how we can make more money off the enforcement. And I'd like to, I mean, if it wouldn't have been, too big of a problem, I'd like to see a copy of those recommendations and who actually sat on that committee. Okay, so you got any questions for me? Because like I say, I've been here since 1985, and we started buying buildings and renovating stuff, thereafter, because the nursing homes, assisted living facilities, Bob and Nancy Reitz came to me one day and said, hey, why don't you, because they were our next door neighbors at the time on Franklin Street, said, why don't you start investing money in downtown? And we really, I think we did a lot, Joe, didn't we, to prevent fires? I mean, most of the buildings that we renovated, because Joe and I worked together quite a bit back then, especially right after he left the city. And, most of our buildings that we renovated, we took the brick up 10 feet above the roof line to keep the fires from going from one side to the other. I still own the only buildings that have fire alarm systems. Don't tell the fire chief. Well, they inspect them pretty regularly, but they got a new guy and he's still a little green behind the ears. But we're still the only own those buildings that have the only fire pull stations, so that if the smoke detectors went off or they needed to pull those, they could. So that's where because I think we have a solution. I think city council just needs to take the right step and let's start building the first garage and let's see how it looks, because it's not going to get any better with the growth, just the basic growth statistics for this county over the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, if we have that 85, 90% growth in this one county and the other 87 counties have no growth or negative growth, it's going to be bigger issues. So, then one last thing, back in the 80s and 90s, and when I sat on council too, the big thing was the 2020 committee. We did this big 2020 committee document, and then it got thrown on some shelf, and no one ever got the doggone 2020 committee report ever back out. Now, we talked about it, the Delaware County Finance Authority meeting. Let's get that out. And, we talked about the 23 corridor study and the 36, 37 corridor study. Well, Delaware County Finance Authority, we're putting in 25 grand for each study, because we know that we need an east-west outer belt. And let's start looking on, let's stop talking about enforcement and all this other stuff, and let's figure out how we can resolve it with one small garage, and 4 or 5 years, take a look at what's the most next needed area and go back with another small, tiny little garage. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope there were no reporters here.
Tracy Payton, manager of the Strand Theater, and I live at 22 Village Gate Drive in Delaware. Vice Mayor Schaefer, you had asked the gentleman from Thurman's what sort of difference he thought it would make between a 2-hour and a 3-hour parking space. I can tell you, for the Strand, the average movie these days is about 2 hours and 10 minutes. Couple that with a pre-show that's 20 to 25 minutes, and people arriving early for concessions, and that's your answer, at least for us. Infinity Wars is 2:36, And a 25-minute pre-show is hitting it right at 3 hours, just for reference. As far as extending the parking meters till 8 p.m., I don't think that's a good idea at all. I would like to echo some of the comments that Joe Diamond made. But at the Strand, 90% of our employees are kids, high school kids. And most of the shifts are longer than 4 hours, and they get in at certain times. If we went to the 8-hour limit, they would have to literally take time out of their shift to go put money in the meter. With that being said, with the increase in fines, kids can't afford that. We're not the only business downtown that employs high school kids, and I know that they can't afford it. We only pay minimum wage to start at the Strand, so those are my comments, but again, I echo what Joe said. Thank you.
Other comments?
I'll take my place. Patrick Bailey, I own Endangered Species Records of 11 West Winter Street. I want to pound on the table a few times, just so you can hear it. You guys hear that? I was on one of the committees, and we discussed the going to 8 o'clock in the evening. And the driving factor behind that was the restaurant business. The restaurants say they need more turnover, that between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock is dinner hour, and people are pulling in, and there's no place to park. And restaurant businesses are losing business. That's where the 8 o'clock in the evening came from, which made sense to me. I have a restaurant, and Buns is right across the street from me, and I frequent a lot of the restaurants on Winter Street and Sandusky Street. And at 5 o'clock, which was the arbitrary hour before, because that's when the banks closed, and we had 4 major banks downtown. And back in the day, those banks might have 15, 20 employees each. Now they don't. Now they're more skeleton crew downtown, the banks. But 5 o'clock, the streets are emptied for about 15, 20 minutes. I watch it right in front of my store. A lot of the bank employees park on Winter Street all day long and do the little shuffle. I know for a fact that the Delaware Health Department, and they got 15 or 20 employees, they do the shuffle all day long. I watch 2 or 3 individuals religiously walk by my window every 2 hours, every single day. I look up and I see them every 2 hours. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not, but they're usually together because it starts at 9 o'clock, and that's when they come to work. So 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, they walk by, and 3 minutes later they walk back because they've gone down and moved their car. So the 3 hour, I want to see the hours extended 3 hours, not 2 hours. I don't think 2 hours is enough. In my record store, we have over 20,000 titles, not 20,000 pieces, but 20,000 individual titles. And when there's people that are coming in to look at records or CDs, they have to hurry. It's hard to look at 20,000 titles in 2 hours, very hard. If they're from out of town, they came to my store specifically to look through those 20,000 titles. If they're from Delaware, they came to pick up the new John Prine album. They're in and out in 5 minutes. But my best customers are from out of town. Easily, my top 10 customers do not live in Delaware, the city. And they come to shop, and they come for a while. I know many of them then go to a restaurant for lunch or dinner. They tell me they do, or they just came from the restaurant for lunch or dinner. They went there first, and now they're in shopping. And 2 hours is just inadequate. That's all there is to it. I don't know what the solution is. I agree with Don. I've been agreeing for 30 years that we need a parking garage, and very specifically right where he is saying that we need it, right there is the perfect place for another level, at least one level, if not two level parking garage. If he's got the ways and means to get this started, it behooves the city to look into that and give him a green light and say, let's go. If we had another 100 parking spaces, all of these committees and all of this conversation would end. We need enforcement, which is the dirty word I heard, but we've got people cheating now. They'll be cheating when there's 100 more spaces. And my last comment is, well, I had two more comments, I'm sorry. The $40, I was part of that when that came about. I was on a committee with Kent when that came about, and that was literally to punish the people that are cheating. And I don't know if it's been effective or not. They're still cheating, but it does indeed punish people from out of town that we're advertising to come to downtown to shop, to eat, to our entertainment district, to our new short north, the new north short north that I heard tonight. Short North has way worse problems than we do, and their tickets are way more expensive. I won't go to Short North. You can't pay me to go to Short North. It won't happen. I'm not going to pay a $60, $70 ticket because I wanted to do something that takes 2 hours, and it's a ticket for a meter is $60. I think, anyway, for Delaware, I think we should lower the 40 down to 25. That was one of my recommendations earlier, and I really think that should happen. I think 40 is a real punishment for people that don't know, and I think the meter should be about $10. So 25 and 10. It needs to be a friendlier situation. It's a frightening situation. People, we're trying to get them to come here instead of going to Short North. So we're trying to give them an attractive alternative. We don't want to imitate Short North into punishment. And that's kind of, I feel that people do get punished. I'm one of the business owners that apologizes a lot to customers and tries to help them out if I can. My goal was to meet them halfway because we're not ripping them off to begin with. So I have given $20 to people to help pay for a $40 ticket and hope that they come back and put on a friendly face. And that's a hard thing to do. Something I've recommended several times over the past few years in council, in these parking meetings, is bringing back the meters to downtown Delaware, having the 3 hours, making them reasonable, but at least it keeps people honest. It's not an arbitrary thing. They know that they're putting money in a meter or they're using their card. Whatever they're doing, they know for a fact that they've got 3 hours or 2 hours and that they have to renew in 2 hours or 3 hours. Right now, 20 years ago, we created this mess of people cheating. And I don't see it going away with the $40 tickets. I really don't. I watched it when I was on Sandusky Street at 24 and 12. I watched it with Thurman's, who said that their employees do not park on the street. And I sat there at 12 and watched an employee of theirs go out and move 4 cars every 2 hours. And yet I was told in letter form that that doesn't happen. And we got it on film. We've had city people come and sit in my store window when I was at 12 and watch it happen. So there's witnesses to it. The meters would help enormously. I do not think it'd be detrimental. Almost every place that there is a successful have meters. I think they have to stay reasonable, a quarter an hour maybe. And as I've brought up before, if you have a meter and it's a quarter an hour or whatever, I'm happy to give my customer a quarter or 50 cents. I'm happy to give it to them physically in coin form and thank them for coming to my store or thank them for coming to downtown Delaware. But paying a $40 fine when they weren't aware of it, and B, they can't find a parking space to begin with because so many people downtown are cheating on a daily basis. And it's not just employees. It's not just high school kids. It is owners of businesses. it's managers, it's businesses that should know better, banks. And it's certainly, and again, I had witnesses to this, it's certainly some of the tenants that live upstairs now go out and move their cars every 2 hours. They're not gone during the day, 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Some of them have wives and kids, and they're out moving the cars back and forth all day long. When I moved my store from Sandusky Street to Winter Street, our business went up almost 30% immediately. Immediately after 4 years of being on Sandusky Street on the main block, I moved to Winter Street, and I think it's not that there's more parking. I think the perception is that there's at least a chance of parking. And there's not a chance of parking on Sandusky Street Monday through Friday. Anyway, in conclusion, I've been on the meetings, I've been on the committees. I think we're heading in the right direction, but listening to other people, we got to listen to everybody too. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to say something in just a second.
Oh.
Hello, Sheila Hiddleston. I live at 502 West William Street, but I'm here on behalf of the Health District. We have a couple of unique situations, and some of what you've said actually would help some of our clients. Right now, I have WIC clients who come into the office. We're open from 7:30 until 5. Some days we're open until 7 for our clients. And sometimes if it's a young mom with a bunch of kids, they are at our office for more than 2 hours. And so for them, if they're even fortunate enough to find a parking space on Winter Street, which is very, very unlikely, then they're going out and finding a ticket. I am familiar with other cities that actually allow businesses, and I think the gentleman with the antique store or even Thurman's could talk to that, where the business owner has the ability to give a voucher to someone who actually was in their place of business for more than that 2 hours. It happened when I lived in another county and worked in another city, where hairdressers, particularly because to get this beautiful, sometimes it takes more than 2 hours to do that, but they were able to do that. But I think the 3 hours would help. We do sometimes have clients that are there for 4 hours, but usually, especially if it's a mom with a bunch of children, 2 hours is really kind of pushing it to try to get them in and out with all of their recertifications. The other issue that we have, though, is we have a lot of clients who are probably only with us for 15 minutes, but they're parking so far away that it takes them longer to drive around, find a parking place, than it takes them to come in and get a birth certificate or a death certificate or some sort of a permit when we're having some of our busier times with our environmental health department. My other issue is staff parking. We have about 70 employees who are in our building, and my staff do not park in the block around the health district. They are not allowed to do that. We do give corrective action. And you feel free to call me if you think you see somebody there, because they are not allowed to do that. But I am very concerned about decreasing the amount of 10-hour parking, because they are allowed to park in those 10-hour slots, not the ones immediately around us and not on the back parking lot there off of Winter and Franklin, but in some of those other parking lots further away from us, they are allowed to park there. If all of those go to 3 hour, then I have lost productivity with staff who are having to run out and feed that meter all of the time. When the health district moved to its current location many, many years ago, long before I was here, we did make a promise to the city that we would not park on Winter, we would not park on Sandusky, we would not park on William, and they're not allowed to park on William until they get past Union Street. But they are allowed to park in some of those 10-hour slots that are in some of those other parking lots. And I've said to Mr. Homan, I don't know what I'm going to do with 70 employees who have to have a place to park. We have to be there to be available to serve our community. If I do have someone who's parking and they're not supposed to be, and they're doing the as the gentleman said, the cheating, then I do need to know about that because we do issue corrective action for staff who park inappropriately. I do have staff who, I don't have anyone who comes in at 9, so I'm not sure what that's about, but I have staff who start at 7:30. They are allowed, if they're going to be in and out, to park in the back lot for just a few minutes to pick up items or things like that. Of course, I have most of my staff that's out and about all day long, and we have parking spaces over at the Eagles lot and also at the church on the corner of Central and Washington. But I just wanted to share, I do think the 3-hour parking would be very, very helpful, but very concerned about decreasing the amount of 10-hour. Thank you.
So I'm Todd Dockenbaugh. I live at 422 Oslo Court, also the owner of Fresh Start Cafe and Bakery at 24 North Sandusky Street. And I'm seeking a little bit of clarity on these recommendations, and maybe you guys can help me. What is the objective? I hear a lot of, we want to do this, this, and this, but I'm trying to figure out what the committee feels or the recommendations they feel it's going to solve. I think we have 3 things on the table right now.
Let me just start with, what we really have is a capacity problem, right? If you have enough capacity, the enforcement issues go away, because I go to a lot of cities that have plenty of parking. They don't charge for parking anywhere because they don't need to, because there's plenty of parking. We're not at that point right now. We have a limited amount of capacity. We have more than some people think, which is places you can park, you have to walk a little bit forward, and part of that's an education thing, but we don't have the capacity that we need. And so the way that we have to manage what capacity we have, and that's where enforcement comes in, deciding, meters and hours of meters. And so that's kind of where these things came from, is our parking consultant said, look, if you want more turnover on these lots, move the 10-hour meter somewhere else. Consider how you want to enforce the meters for a longer period of time. I think Pat brought up, some of the restaurants complain because the lots around the restaurants fill up and people don't move. So that's where these are coming from. It's just to try and better manage the capacity that we have. But all these have unintended consequences, and that's why we're having this chance for everybody to weigh in on these things.
Well, thank you for clarifying, because I would argue that none of these recommendations address capacity.
No, they
don't increase capacity. And if the problem is to increase, that we need increased capacity, then I think we need to address the problem. I heard you say turnover. Turnover to me says we want people to leave. And we're trying to get people to come to Delaware to stay, to not just come in my shop for 10 minutes and leave, or go into a restaurant and turn a table and leave, or go see a movie and leave. We want someone to come in, shop, go to the antique store, grab lunch, stay for a movie. And what we're doing is saying, you've been here long enough, get out. And I think that's a bad message to send, especially when people are coming in from outside of Delaware. And they're traveling hours and coming here and trying to see what the new thing is. Delaware is getting a lot of attention. I want to see it. And what I hear is we're trying to say, thanks for coming, get out. You've been here long enough. And I think that's the opposite of what we want. Moving 10-hour, getting to the 10-hour parking, and you've said twice, we're not getting rid of it, we're moving it, which, let me just give you some feedback. Sounds like it's already been decided. So I wonder if this is an exercise sometimes. But I'd like to know what that does, because I have employees as well, right? They use those 10 hours. They work longer than 3-hour shifts. They're going to need a place to park. I've heard conversations, we're going to make them walk or put them in outlots. So I don't know if every business then is not allowed to have employees park within a certain space around their business. I don't know if that includes City Hall. Or City Hall members are going to park in outlots and walk as well. I don't know. So I just don't understand, if we're trying to increase capacity, we're messing around with dollars and numbers and hours and meters, and I think we're not even addressing the right issue. So I agree with a lot of the things that were said. If we're going to do a parking garage, it's going to take time. We're already years behind, And by the time we do our study and get permits and so, we're going to be even more behind. And we're going to be building for today, 5 years from now, and we're going to, we're only going to grow. So I think it's time just to bite the bullet. And if we need capacity, let's build capacity. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jones, anything else before we move on?
Nope, okay, I'm good.
Thank you, everyone. This has been really helpful to me. I've been involved in this parking situation since my first time on council in 2013, when I was walking door to door and people kept complaining about parking. And we've approached it from a number of different ways, finally hiring a consultant. But the input from those of you who this affects most is really helpful to me, and it's really kind of changed my way of thinking on a lot of these kind of things. So
I got 2 pages full of notes here. So.
Yeah, and I just like to, my number, contact information is on the website. If any of you want to meet one-on-one, I'm more than happy to do that, because I'm committed that we are not moving forward with stuff until we feel like we've heard from people. And again, we're not going to please everybody, but we want to make the best, the most well-informed decisions we can. So this has been really helpful, and I'm more than interested in continuing to talk with you about these issues.
If I can, one comment is, I haven't been around as long as Mr. Diamond has, but I moved here in 93, and I remember, what's that? I'm knocking on the wood. But I moved here in 93, and I remember what our downtown used to look like. And if I can put a positive spin on this, this is a good problem. It's a good problem. So we'll figure it out, but I couldn't, I'm glad we're having these conversations, because the conversations that were going on, 20 years ago was, hell in a handbasket. So,
a lot of towns would like to have this problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for your comments.
Item number 8 is staff comments.
I'll keep it short. I mentioned earlier about the dynamic speed feedback signs. We'll have the draft report next Parking Safety Committee meeting. And Nathan McCoy wasn't able to be here tonight. He was going to update you guys on West Hall Drive. Is what I'll have him do is follow up with an email and an update. And hopefully we should have something more on that initiative for next meeting also.
Good, thank you. Yeah, nothing additional. Kelsey? Those of you who don't know Kelsey Scott, she has been a major player in this whole parking situation.
That's a lot of paperwork for.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not gonna use all this paperwork. I promise. I promise. I just kind of wanted to go over and kind of talk about the surveys that we've done in the last couple months. And yes, I have a lot of paperwork, but a lot of this stuff you guys already addressed. So, and I kind of want to take the time. I really appreciate everybody's feedback. Just to echo Mr. Jones and Mr. Schaefer, this has been really awesome for me to hear. I also really appreciate people paying new patrons parking tickets. I didn't realize how many businesses were doing that. And I think, not that you would need to do that by any means, but that says a lot about how much you care about Delaware and helping us look good too. So it's a community effort, and I really appreciate that. So I just kind of wanted to go over the surveys that we did in the last couple months, one of which was a business survey. So a lot of these things I'm just going to skim through for the most part. We did a downtown business survey around the idea to kind of feel out some of the businesses about how they would feel about an employee loop. Maybe working with the outlots, which I think Mr. Donbaugh touched on, and then doing a continuous loop for employees. We were looking at the Pat Catan's lot. We never opened up conversations about it. We just wanted to gauge interest. So a lot of the questions that we asked were about that. We had 35 surveys that we collected. 60 of those businesses believe that fines should be under $25. So that is 100% what we talked about. 71% of the businesses agreed that turnover was good for business. I think it depends on the business that we're talking to, though. We know that. I also found it interesting that 45% of the people that took the survey had private parking for their employees. So that kind of might give some insight of who was taking this survey, maybe more law firms, maybe more businesses that can afford that private parking. And then the majority believe we need a parking garage. We know all that. It seems as though that that was one of the surveys that we took. The other one, which we'll talk about more, we have, we're going to have our downtown parking advocacy group that focused on pedestrian experience next week, next Monday, for council to kind of talk about what they've done, recommendations that they have from the projects that they've been working on. And one of them, and again, we'll hear more about this next week, but our branded lot survey, we were thinking, and here I brought a couple visual aids. One of the big projects that the Pedestrian Experience Committee was working on was, what if we branded our public lots to make them more identifiable to patrons that might not be as familiar? What would that look like? With that, we came up with maybe putting markers at the very beginning of each. Oh, good. I made 10 million copies, so we can pass them around too. Having markers at the entrances and exits of each of the public parking lots, as well as having our logo, our badge logo, at the exits and entrances. In addition, we were also thinking, we focused on the Franklin Street lot because we thought that needed a little more love than a lot of the other ones. Another big concern, and with the Franklin lot especially, is the blurred line of private to public parking. So maybe we could, and so we thought maybe we could have lines that could kind of make it a little bit more easy to identify, which is private and which is public. So the health district was so kind and sponsored a branded lot event, which we'll talk about later. But basically, we wanted to gauge the interest of patrons and residents. How do they feel about this? Would this help? And kind of what we got was, and it's hard to word a question like, do you think that this is cool? And people are like, yeah, I guess that would help me, but is it necessary? Is kind of what we were getting at. We got a lot of mixed reviews, but for the most part, everybody thinks that it's more signage. It's a signage issue, which I don't think is a very big surprise, but I'm impressed that a lot of people recognize, maybe we don't need to spend tax money on these things as much as signage itself, getting down to the nitty gritty. So we had an open response question of, please comment on any ideas you have to identify a public parking lot. And people love these questions because they love giving input. So I printed out all of the different open-ended answers that people had. I have a few more for people too. But they're usually, a lot of them are comical, but you can tell though, people don't like the red balls by any means for markers. And we also want a parking garage. So not too much to report. I feel like everything is pretty straightforward, gang. I think that, the business survey really reflects what we heard tonight. And the branded lot survey is really just getting down to the nitty gritty. We need signage, more clear signage. So nothing too shocking from my end, but I appreciate everybody's time. And if you have any questions, anybody in the audience, you can come and talk to me after, or anybody up here.
My mom always said I beat to a different drum. I'm not the only one who likes the big red ball.
You are the only one. Everybody else thinks it's Target. They think it's weird.
Now I think it's Target.
Yeah.
What you said.
And I think that's a fair argument. A lot of people like
Yeah, well, I guess.
some people like the pedestals. Somebody had an idea.
It's about lighted light. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that was a really good one. I like that one too.
I like those.
But I guess things that we'll need to talk about more is, is it necessary? Would it be really helpful? Is it worth taxpayer dollars? Kind of going from there. So, and again, we'll hear more about recommendations from the Pedestrian Experience Committee next Monday. So looking forward to that.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Committee comments, Mr. Jones?
I have none tonight.
Nor do I. We are adjourned at 7:52.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
That's great feedback.